welcome to the Cardiff Central podcast. After last week's administration special, we'll be building on the feedback from that and getting back into on-field action, looking back on Connacht in the European Challenge Cup ahead to Judgement Day this weekend, as well as covering all the non-financial news and the latest from the Rags and the Pathway. On the panel this week, Frazier Stroud. Frazier, how are you?
Yeah, good. I was glad to be on holiday all of last week. So yeah, missed all of the shitstorm that happened.
Any conspiracy theories that Fraser is Helford Capital have yet to be proven. just in case anyone asks. We've
Is
also
that
got
proven
Steve
or disproven?
Yeah, Steve, how are you?
Much better this week, actually. Had a weekend in the Brecon Beacons, completely isolated from anything related to rugby football, and feel much better for it.
And Tony Esposito. Tony, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Busy with kids off.
Yeah, fun times indeed. Right, we had that podcast last week. Then obviously no normal programming. The special with Steve, Andrew Ford, and Linklater from CF10. So if you haven't listened to that yet, go and find that on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts, covering all of the events up to going into administration last week, what happened in those few days, and what the future looks like for the Blue and Blacks. We had a bit of feedback on it, plenty of good stuff. So thank you for the nice comments. One or two though, including Gerald Ansty on YouTube, who left a very long comment with absolutely zero punctuation. So I've picked out a small sentence from it rather than read you the whole thing. But stating that the only thing that Alan Jones and Richard Holland have done is sit back with the rest of the board and watched Cardiff slide down into administration. It's just that's not necessarily true. I don't think that takes into account the whole situation. But Tony, you weren't on the pod. Did you think we let Jones and particularly Richard Holland, is he staying off a little bit lightly? Is there more questions to be asked about them?
I think there are. I think from everything I've heard about how they've handled this situation itself, it sounds like they've done a fantastic job in making sure that everyone has secured or kept their jobs and that they were proactive in making sure that the WRU were involved from day dot and so it could be as swift as possible. I do just question the previous periods of their tenure in the roles, because I presume Dickie will go as part of the transition once everything is sort of settled down. That's generally what happens when a company gets bought out in non-sport world. So I have no reason to believe that it's different here. But yeah, I just have questions about. I think they might be getting off a bit lightly because of how they've been before, because of their performance in the last few months around getting this Helford stuff resolved pretty quickly with the WRU buyout.
Steve's that fair? And also I listened to Scrum 5 pod with Abby Tierney after we did our pod last week, and I noticed that she mentioned something interesting, that she would be the one picking the CEO, the sort of new chair of the board. Is that obviously I think we don't know that Richard Holland is leaving yet, but is it fair to question his record as Cardiff CEO, and would we be confident that Tierney picking the CEO is a good thing rather than the new board?
I didn't hear that that podcast with Abby, because after recording our pod, I think I just meditated for a couple of hours and tried to calm down a bit. But I think it's fair to bring up what's happened in the past with Richard Holland and the board in general, because the way this played out, as we said last week, it could have been considerably worse. So they identified a problem and found a solution. And they get credit for that, but at the same time, you probably can't cast them as heroes either. The way I'm seeing it at the moment is, whatever happens, they're going to have this on their record. They're going to always be associated for what has been a complete disaster. The board have gone, Alan Jones has gone. It's slightly different for Richard Holland because he's an employee. As Tony says, I'd be surprised if he's going to be the chief executive in future. That's not any special knowledge. That's just thinking it through constructively. There's lots of reasons to want to start with bunch of new faces. So at this time, is there any point in sort of sticking the knife in, because the knife's already in? Do you necessarily need to twist it at the moment? Probably not. But I think there's going to be an inquisition over how this has come to pass, which is going to last for a while. And the past is probably going to be dug into a bit, but at the moment, as I say, it's probably best not to twist the knife.
Yeah, I think that's what my takeaway from it was as well, is that, like, especially on the pod focus generally, we tried to keep it a bit more what's going to come next and what the future looks like for Cardiff Rugby, because I think everyone can see what's happened over the last few years. Everyone's got an opinion on it. I don't think you've gained a massive amount really by sort of by sitting there, but and looking back on what was for us anyway. Obviously, the powers that be is a relative exercise for them, but
yeah, I mean, this is an obvious sort of time of reflection over the past few years, really, isn't it? And I mean, I know I've got a mental list of poor decisions made by Cardiff Rugby Club that goes back to the late 1990s. And I'm sure Tony can name plenty of poor decisions he can think.
I got a list I've written down because I know I always forget stuff. Yeah. Oh, my memory's terrible. But
Yeah.
And while I think it's right to point out that there have been mistakes, things like the multitude of managers that we've thrown in, and the 2 terms we've had with Tulip and John, and Mark Hammett leaving after 6 months because of a player revolt, and the other bits and pieces. Like, we're back at Cap because of Dickie, and moving us away from CCS because of the amount that we were failing at that point. Bilbao came under his reign. Obviously, we didn't capitalize on that because of other forces like Danny leaving and Sherritt leaving, I think, because of the wage bill coming down, because I think we signed Van der Merwe from Ulster, but he didn't play for us because he went to London Irish because we decided we couldn't cover his wages because of a change in the salary cap or something. So there's positives, but yeah, like you said, I'm happy not to kick a man when he's down, but I think there's rightly conversations around about they shouldn't be seen as the all-conquering heroes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they're not, as Simon, also of the pod, said in the podcast WhatsApp, and I thought you put it very well. They're not the villains, but they're not the heroes either.
Yeah.
Fraser, I don't know how closely you followed the sort of administration and financial stuff over the last week, but what's your sort of general reaction and thoughts on what's occurred over the last week?
I think the primary lesson that we've learned is the Middle East aren't interested in soft power with Welsh rugby. I think we all got weird, confused when that was initially announced. It's like this consortium of Qatari businessmen or wherever they were based. Because, I mean, why would you invest millions of pounds in a Cardiff Rugby club? It'd be a very odd decision on their part. So I think the main takeaway I've had from it is that I know they mentioned they did the due diligence checks with that company and they're not going to use them again. But I still find it like quite confusing as to how this even got this far and what that actually looked like. And there's, well, all well and good not using that company again, but surely you wouldn't just rely on the one company to be like, yeah, it's all good, and just be like, fine, yeah, go for it. I think there needs to be people kind of investigating who is buying a club from lots of different angles to make sure it's like viable, because it seems quite crazy that this all happened. And in terms of like Holland and Jones, like, I mean, they've been through a hell of a lot of stuff in the last month. So yeah, like kicking men when they're down, I think is not the best policy, and they probably had a pretty rough time of it. But yeah, I don't envisage any Middle Eastern oligarchs investing in Welsh regional rugby anytime soon. So back to normality.
The confusion is definitely that. Chatting to some people at the Rags game on Saturday, I think confusion is generally the overwhelming like emotion at this point now, in terms of why on earth Helford was sort of getting in the first place if they weren't actually interested in ploughing any money and that sort of stuff. But I'm sure in the fullness of time that'll all come out, and over the next few weeks we'll try and concentrate on the rugby, and we'll pick this back up at the end of the season to see what's come out at that point, and how.
Can we put the boot in then?
Yeah, we'll start slagging in the summer. That's what it's for. Moving on to on-field action then, and with no regular pod last week, we're catching up now on the action of 10 days or so ago. Cardiff fell 35-20 to Connacht in the European Challenge Cup round of 16 out in Galway. A tense first half, and then Connacht scored early in the second half to make it 21-8. But Cardiff fought back well to make it 21-20 with about 15 to go. There was 3 excellent tries from Cardiff, finished off by Ray Lilo, Ben Thomas and Josh Adams, respectively. Unfortunately, errors and ill discipline allowed the home side to sort of run away with it in the end and scoring 2 late-ish tries. A couple of 3-word thoughts from supporters, which I think if you typed in general Cardiff Rugby supporter reaction, 3-word thoughts, like an AI thing, this is what they would also come up with. Things like too many errors, Rob Hill, frustrating as hell, RJW, don't help ourselves, Ben Bryan, same old Cardiff, Liam Confrey, always chasing games, Roy Buster, and lack of physicality from Nathan Long. Steve, on the game itself, so what was your general feeling at full time on that Saturday night?
I mean, it's a weird one, isn't it? Because that game feels like it was a couple of decades ago at this point. But yeah, it was a frustrating game. I think it came down to that moment where we won a penalty. Ben Thomas put an absolutely beautiful kick into the corner, and we then messed up the line out, which we did a couple of times in that game, and then Connacht then kind of dragged the game back because at that moment it's we'd scored some really good tries and it felt like we were suddenly the momentum was coming our way. Connacht were possibly panicking a bit. Yeah, little moments like that proved to be quite frustrating. But yeah, I mean, as you say, perhaps a bit of a microcosm of Cardiff over the past few seasons where played some really, really good stuff and did some really, really poor stuff. So it was a good example of Cardiff at our absolute best and our worst over the course of 80 minutes.
Tony, your thoughts on the game, and I wonder as well, do we look back on that last few weeks with going from Lions into Benetton and then to Connacht and look at sort of Jockey's team selections where there wasn't, his resting players coming out of Wales camp, he rested a few for Benetton. Does that lead to that game on Saturday night where quite a lot of our sort of senior and players you'd expect to be leading us were a little bit off the boil, it's fair to say?
I still think we targeted the right game. I think if we're going to look at selection questions from Sherrett, it's the group games where we went slightly weaker out in France and could have maybe had this as a home tie. That would have done wonders for the coffers as well. So there's obviously a management period where our better players have been through the ringer in the Six Nations as well. But I think we've targeted the right game. We were in it. We were in that game, could have won that game. But we Cardiffed it up a bit too much and just made key errors at the wrong times. But yeah, I still rather a cut run than anything.
Steve, I wonder, just with the sort of better and more experienced players there, despite them, being more the leaders in the squad, actually, if you go through guys like Belcher, Teddy Williams, James Botham, Ben Thomas, they haven't played in a lot of these sort of big one-off knockout games yet in their careers necessarily. They've sort of been involved in test games, but we haven't had a lot of success later in the season so far at Cardiff where they've been in the first team. Is that something that we need to develop? Is that something they'll learn as we try and get back there year on year?
Well, one thing I do remember thinking after the game was I thought Ben Thomas was excellent, as he generally is, but I thought it was a performance with a bit of gravitas about it, if you know what I mean. He suddenly felt like not just a very good URC player, which he has been for a while. It suddenly felt like this is an international player dropping back down into URC. And I thought he played with authority. So seem to be kind of evolving into that kind of guy you want in those big games. Over the course of this season, Teddy Williams has definitely moved in that direction. It's probably the case with our squad at the moment that we've got quite a lot of young players, quite a lot of veteran players, but we don't have that many players who are in that sweet spot. That sweet spot where in their sort of mid-20s into late 20s, where they're experienced, they played in a lot of big games, they're established in the side, and they're also at their peak. I think that's probably the weakness in the squad at the moment. It's that age profile. But in terms of personalities, one positive that's come over the past couple of seasons, which obviously have been quite troubled, is I think some big personalities have emerged. So people that you can build a really strong team around. So yeah, something's developing there. But I think it's more to do with the age profile rather than specific games people have played in.
It'll take one win to click, and that'll be it. I think you're right. There's some really good youth players in there that or younger players that can drag us through. And you're right, the previous few years where the squad building maybe hasn't been to the levels that we've needed, or we've re-signed players that have probably hit their ceiling, and their ceiling is a bit lower than what we need it to be. Means that we've not been in a fantastic position to win those games, to give the players now the experience. I think you're spot on about Ben Thomas. He looks like a lad who has played international rugby and did it well, albeit in the difficult circumstances they had. And he's realised, I can do this. I can be that player. He's got club captain written all over him, I think. And so you just have to fight out for it with Teddy. So
yeah. I was about to say, I mean, him and Teddy Williams, they both look like club captains to me. Yeah.
Well, we've got Tandy coming back potentially from the SRU, so says the rumour drum. So we can start doing the co-captains thing that they've obviously introduced across all of Scottish rugby and go for that. Fraser, Tony mentioned it there about sort of our pool campaign. If you look at sort of the record as a whole in the Challenge Cup for Cardiff, we played 5, won 1 and lost 4. Somehow made it as far as the round of 16 on the back of that. There was a lot of squad rotation in the pool stage. Do we look at it as a real missed opportunity where we could have got a home knockout and had a real dig at making it to a final in Cardiff?
I believe those 5 games were all against Connacht as well, weren't they? I think I don't know. Maybe I think I hoped that we would do better, and there were like quite a few games in the pool stages when we should have probably won, or if we'd had a stronger team out, we might have got the points. But also maybe I need to be a bit more realistic about where our ceiling is, and that we're still not quite there in terms of a squad to really last like the 80 minutes. Like, obviously we seem to trail off at the end and not quite grab the match, which was kind of similar last season. That happened a lot last season. It's happened a bit less this season, but I still feel that we're not quite there to like consistently have those 80-minute performances. So obviously it's disappointing to lose to Connacht again. And again, when you guys were recounting it, it's like, copy and paste from every like important match we've lost is like not quite getting enough, making silly errors in crucial times of the game and stuff like that. So I think it is learning, and like Tony and Steve mentioned, like the age profile, we've got the younger players who are kind of building into themselves, and the older players, and maybe next season we're going to be better suited, and hopefully we do some recruitment if we have any money or whatever the situation of that is, that we can build on it. And just have that stability, and then maybe next year we'll be in a better position. We might have a home tie against Connacht and we wouldn't beat them. That would be great. And yeah, just on the Ben Thomas thing, I think he had that match against France where he had the worst game. Was it against France or was it Italy? I don't know. But he ostensibly looked terrible at 10, and everyone was like, "Why are you playing at 10? What's going on?" But the way he came through that was really impressive. Like the mentality he showed to just like shrug that off and move forward. And yeah, like you guys have said, he seems to be like building that personality, and he's got the start, like he's got the talent to be quality. And if he's continue to grow in that mentality that he's got already, and yes, he's got this is a special player, and we can build around him for the next season.
Just on the squad building, Gareth on Twitter sent his now weekly question asking when we're going to sign a second row. We will do our sort of squad building at some point in the next few weeks. We're going to wait and see exactly how the next two games go and how likely we are to make a playoff at the end of the season. And we'll build from there probably sometime in between the Munster game and the South Africa talks. I think there's 1 or 2 weeks where it's back to European knockouts in that time. Moving on then from Connacht onto some news, a bit of recruitment retention rumour on an outgoing this one. Neil Fissler at Rugby Pass has reported that Worcester Warriors, who will back in the English Championship next season, are interested in signing Rory Jennings, the centre/fly half, who's I believe on a 1-year deal at Cardiff, so would be up this summer. He's made 14 appearances in all competitions, 8 starts. Fraser, come back to you. On Jennings, is he somebody who we would really like to retain, or is it sort of understandable if we perhaps moved on from him this summer?
I mean, if he did move on, I wouldn't be devastated, but I think he has kind of grown into the shirt over the season, and he started off a little bit. I was questioning his ability and whether he did fit in the team. He has seemed to grow into the role and get a bit better game by game, and has definitely improved in the second half of the season. I think he's a really useful player to have in terms of his versatility. And I think in terms of next season, I think continuity is important. So I would prefer that he did remain, and you can kind of build on the team we already have, because I think too much chopping and changing, especially in the context of what's recently happened with going into administration, just like the threats and worry. I think to do too much wheeling and dealing I'd prefer not to do that. So I'd like to see him there again. I think allow him to continue to kind of understand the systems and get into the role. He's only been here this season, hasn't he? So I think I'd give him a bit more time. I think there's something in him that we should stick with, personally.
He's a player that divides opinion a little bit on social media randomly. Like there's a few people who are quite vociferously against Rory Jennings ever being in the squad, but yeah, I think I agree that he's solid enough. My consideration would probably be that he's non-Welsh qualified, and I think that probably plays quite majorly into this one, in that with wanting to pack more non-Welsh qualified players into our pack, whether losing him might be a necessity, unfortunately, in order to do that. But certainly as a fair points as a player, that keeping him around for continuity, and it seems to be quite a popular member of the squad as well, as fitted in quite nicely in that sense. So we'll keep an eye on that one over the next few weeks. 2 other quick pieces of news. Cardiff Rugby have put tickets back on sale today, Tuesday, as we're recording, following the sale of the club. So do go and buy a season ticket if you can, but if not, then certainly have a look at tickets for Munster next Friday, the 25th, the last home game of the season. They've extended the early bird offer until next Monday after Judgement Day, so take advantage of that. It'd be great to properly pack cap for that one and get behind the players in obviously the circumstances of off the field, but also what is actually a massive game on the field as well. And then I spotted an image of Will Davis-King in hospital on Instagram, just randomly appeared. He was very obviously post-op, but I've absolutely no idea what the op was on. It was not obvious what he'd had operated at all. The only thing I would say is that if you're having an operation at this point of the season, it's probably season ending. So that's probably it for Will Davis-King this year, and we'll wait to see whether we see him next year. There's one then final piece of sad news. Alan Priday, the former fullback, passed away last week. He made his debut in April 1953 against Harlequins and went on to play 410 times for Cardiff, scoring 33 tries. Before finishing in 1966, he won 2 Welsh caps away at Ireland in 1958 and at home against Ireland in 1961. He also represented the Barbarians, the RAF, and Glamorgan County. He spent his last season playing for Rugby RFC in their early years as a club, and post-playing would go on to be a committee man and secretary of Cardiff Rugby Club. Later life would be president of the former Players Association and of Cardiff Athletic Club. Steve, as our resident pod history buff, Alan Priday seems to be like a true Cardiff rugby man.
Yeah, I mean, a real link with the past has gone. I mean, on a personal level, obviously I'm not quite old enough to have seen him play, but when I first started going to Cardiff back in the 1980s, he was the announcer, and I was listening to on the Cardiff Rugby Museum website. There's an oral history interview with him, and listening to that, I'm remembering hearing that voice coming out of the speakers in the South Stand. So he's always kind of been the voice of the Arms Park in my mind. And you listen to him speak, he remembers first going to a game at the Arms Park in 1945 and getting the bug then and wanting to play for Cardiff, which he then did 410 times. He then worked off field as an announcer. I remember his articles being in the programme, and of course he was a committee man and athletic club president. So going all the way back to 1945, that's 80 years of association with Cardiff Rugby Club. Yeah, an incredible link with the past is gone, but a life well lived, I'd say.
Absolutely, and the thoughts of all of us are with his family and friends at this time. Alan Priday, who passed away last week, aged 92. At this point of the pod, then, if you are enjoying what you're listening to, please feel free to like and subscribe on whatever audio platform you're using, or if you're on YouTube and looking at our faces. There was a comment last week that suggested me, Steve, and Andrew look like unemployed builders. I assume it wasn't Lynn who was involved in the three unemployed builders comment, which sparked a great deal of debate around when does an unemployed builder just become unemployed, and also what could we build? Because I am the world's least practical man. I don't know about you, Steve.
I will say it was it was very gentlemanly of Professor Dog One to leave Lynn out of that, which I assume is why he only mentioned three of us. I asked my significant other used to be involved in civil engineering, and I asked her if I could maybe borrow some high vis or something like that for the next pod, but no luck so far. But if Professor Dog One, if you're watching, I'm going to make an effort to look more presentable from now on. I think we're all going to now be a bit more aware of the visual aspect of this podcast experience.
I'm just looking around because I'm sat in the room where all my kids' toys are, and I'm sure I've got a hard hat that I could find in it.
Well, if you do want to watch on the YouTube and to try and guess what our professions or currently out of profession that we should be in, do feel free to like and subscribe to the channel. Loads of pods on there from Welsh Rugby, the other three Welsh clubs, the URC, the women's game, which Six Nations rumbles on. Wales putting in a brave effort against France on the weekend, and the URC as a whole. Right, Rags Corner. There's been two games since we last done a proper pod. The Cardiff beat Bridgend 14-29 at the Brewery Field the weekend before last. A 6-point win with tries from Ethan Lloyd, Elijah Evans, Joe Goodchild, Matty Young and Aled Ward, as well as the boot of Harry Wild. And then a narrow loss on the weekend, 43-48 against Llandovery at the Arms Park. 2 points for that one. Tries from Steph Emanuel, Jason Harris, 2 for Matty Young, Benji Williams, Joe Williams, and again, the boot of Harry Wild. Game on the weekend was, Tony, we were at it, marshalling our children around the South Stand somehow, so causing all sorts of chaos. It was a cracking game, a really good advert for Super Rugby Cymru, and the SRC pod will be out this week. I'm sure they'll mention it a bit as well. But Cardiff flew out of the blocks, scored some early tries. Unfortunately, were the victim of a 6-2 bench as two backs went off early doors. Derek Cross with a compound fracture of his finger, which sounds absolutely minging and looked pretty painful on the pitch. And Steph Emanuel, there was a lot of blood. Steph Emanuel took a knock to the head, so he'll be going through the return to play protocols as well, which meant that Matty Young, who had a thigh problem, and Tom Bowen, who had a very heavily taped up ankle, were hobbling around for the best part of a half there. So just think legs ran out of them in the end. But a fantastic 70-meter interception try from back rower Benji Williams to steal a losing bonus point, having Harry Wild having kicked a penalty to deny Llandovery the extra super duper bonus point moments before. Were you at Bridgend as well, Tony?
No, I was down West Wales drinking in my friend's pub.
Fair enough. I don't what and if you managed to see as much a bit more of the game than I did, chasing Derry around. What was your thoughts of the Rags on the weekend and where they are as well this season?
I was really impressed by how they stuck in it, especially with those injuries. They could have quite easily, especially after the week those lads have had as well. We were having a conversation about whether they were also included in being TUP'd, and I don't think I knew, but I guess they are. But that must have been so awful for them this week, and then to play, and then to put in that performance of a dogged performance, because Llandovery turned up and they played some really good stuff. There was a second row, I think his name was Oshan Davis, who was just marauding around the field. Like he had a fantastic game for Llandovery. But yeah, for us to stick in it, first that big swing right at the very end where we went from losing 6 points to one league wise to it being 5-2 with that Benji Williams interception was just shows what sort of fight that team have got currently as well. Like they're deservedly top of the table. There's not been many teams I've seen who are at their level this year.
Absolutely, and a nod to Matty Young as well. I've watched him quite a bit this season at fullback. He scored 3 tries in the last 2 games. I think he's 20, maybe just about to turn 21 potentially this year. That is a guy who is too good for Super Rugby Cymru now. It's coming around time for him to step up to the first team, perhaps, depending on how the next few weeks go. Could be taken to South Africa and have a run on the hard, fast pitches down there, because his ability to cut through on a counter-attack is quite remarkable.
It looks like he's had the Wolverine treatment and not had adamantium added to his bones. He's had rubber, because he just hits a man and just somehow bounces away and just carries on and makes extra yards. Like, yeah, he's such a lovely runner. And when you're in a team with Derry Cross and you stand out as a fantastic runner, like there's something there. Especially Tom Bowen as well. I love his little legs running.
He may need a bit of bulking Young, because he is a wire of a bloke, but yeah, he's certainly one to keep an eye on. So next for the Rags now, the last game of the Super Rugby Cymru regular season is this week. They play Pontypool away on Thursday night, 7:30 kickoff at Pontypool Park. It's not on telly. It's only on Thursday because obviously they can't use the Arms Park on Saturday because of Judgement Day. I think Bridgend Llandovery is the live game, so maybe they'll have a camera at Pontypool Park and chuck some live updates in as it goes. At the moment, Cardiff are top, 7 points ahead of Ebbw Vale. Ebbw do have a game in hand, which is Wednesday night. They play Aberavon away, and then they play Swansea home in their last game on Saturday. So if Ebbw Vale fail to get anything from Aberavon, then Cardiff will finish top of the league. Otherwise, we'll just be trying to better their result against Swansea, essentially. But they'll know what they have to do on Saturday. We do have a better points difference by 48 points at the moment, which could prove significant. Doesn't actually matter, of course, because it's all playoffs and stuff at the end of the season. I think we're guaranteed top 2 now, so we'll have a home quarter and a home semi. No idea what it means for the final, whether that's a neutral venue or not, but yeah, it's all good stuff for the Rags at the moment. A bit of other pathway news then. There's been quite a lot of national age grade action over the last few weeks. The under-18s are playing in the under-18 Six Nations Festival in France. They've beaten Ireland 32-24 with Cardiff players Dylan Barrett, Tom Howe, Alfie Progodzic, Bailey Cutts and Rhys Cummings all involved. Tom Howe's crossed for a try, and it's worth having a look at Rhys Cummings' 50-22 on the YouTube watch back of the game. It's a hell of a boot that he's got on him. Absolutely sticks it right down the other end of the pitch. And then yesterday, Monday, Wales beat Georgia 17-10 in a bit of a scrappier game. That one had Gabe Williams, Lloyd Lucas, Cummins kept his spot, and Ben Kuma involved. Lucas kicked 7 points. Obviously, Josh Turnbull on the coaching staff out in France as well. And then the under-19s lost to Ireland 24-46 at Aberavon the weekend before last, before battering Italy 67 at Merthyr on the weekend. Cam Tyler Grocott, Tom Cottle, Sean Davis, Oshan Darwin Lewis, and Johan Penry have been involved in both of those games. Cottle scored a try in the first one and then captained the team in the second one. So plenty of players coming through the pathway at the moment. Right, final part.
Can I, sorry, just in relation to the pathways, well, like under 18s and under 19s and all that kind of stuff, I think that WRU or World Rugby or whoever need to make it a lot easier to know what's going on, because I do find it's quite difficult to obtain the information. And if I like have to Google like Wales under 18s, and then you have to look at an article to find out who they were playing and where they were playing. There's no like fixture list. It's just all very hard to keep track of, and I'd love to be more on top of it. It's like, if we're doing shit at the moment, so I really want to believe in the next generation. So like, allow me to see how they're doing. I did get the information, but it was just quite difficult. So I think that'd be a really good thing for World Rugby or whoever to just make it more cohesive and easier to digest as like a product, really.
Yeah, I mean, I watched the Wales under-18s play Georgia yesterday. I watched the YouTube live stream, and it was a really good game. It was a really good win, actually, because Georgia were well up for that. But like the only way I knew that was on was because I happened to have my television onto YouTube, and it came up as recommended. There's no other. I hadn't seen. I mean, obviously, I'm fairly switched on with rugby, I like to think, but I hadn't seen it advertised anywhere. Might be something to think about. But it was a very enjoyable game, got to say. I thought Lloyd Lucas played very well.
You'd think the WRU would be advertising like that sort of stuff, especially if it's on YouTube for people to watch, and releasing team sheets, especially as at a time like Fraser said, especially at a time where the men's team aren't playing particularly well. Try and get people excited about the other stuff that's going on, and seeing that there are a lot of talent coming through. It's one of the good things about watching the SLC is seeing all those players that are coming through and knowing that it's not going to be dark forever.
Yeah, I think for the 18s, there has been a team sheet and there has been like a match report, but it's been very much like, here's the team sheet, by the way, the game's tomorrow, and here's the match report, by the way, you can't actually watch it if you like. We're not linking you to watch it anyway, you have to find it yourself. So yeah, they also have obviously not sent a media guy out to France with the men's under 18s team by the looks of it. There's no coverage from the camp there at all, which is a bit odd. And then the 19s games, the only way I've seen them is they've been advertised by the host club. So Aberavon and Merthyr
Have there been any highlights from the under-19s games put up anywhere?
They tweeted a video from the game at Merthyr against Italy on the weekend. It was recorded by somebody on their Nokia 3210, I would suggest, stood in the corner flag of the Wern, and you can't really get any sort of sense like what's going on in the game. It was more of like almost like a compilation package of some moments of the game rather than highlights as such. But no, I know that they are. There's like Cardiff are the same a bit with like the under 16s. They're quite guarded on giving out too much information a bit, so they don't have people coming in and poaching players, and particularly English people looking over the bridge there. But yeah, there's must be a better balance to be struck between sort of hiding them away entirely and not allowing people to be poached, and also for these players to sort of be exposed to media type stuff as well, doing interviews and that sort of thing. Yeah, something to think about for them, certainly. Right, final part of the pod then, Judgement Day this weekend. Before we get into the game itself, we had a question from Nathan on Twitter who asked, with the potential for a poor turnout at Judgement Day with a rumoured only 20,000 tickets sold so far, is there a case for moving it to the start of the season when all four clubs have something to play for? From my understanding, this is the last year of the current Judgement Day deal. So whether that is part of the new PRA or whether they discuss that separately, I don't know. I don't know if I'll just chuck it open to the floor, really. I don't know if anyone's got any strong opinions on Judgement Day as a thing. I know personally, I don't go. I'm not particularly interested in going to the Millennium Stadium to watch it, but it certainly would strike me that if they're going to continue it, then October is the more ideal time. Don't all jump in.
Yeah. No, I think I agree that the timing is odd because the seasons. No, I mean we've still all got a little bit. Well, not all of us, the Dragons obviously not, but there's still something to play for with most of the teams, which is good. So there's something hanging on, I suppose. But I think as like it's not really a celebration, and then we've got another 3 or 2 games after that. It's a bit like an odd, because it's presented as this big celebration of Welsh rugby, and I think if you did it at the start of the season, like you're mentioning, it would make a lot more sense, and I think it would kind of invigorate people and gives you something to look forward to. See how your team's going to start off the season. Because I don't think it's anything wrong with it. It brings in a fair bit of money if it sells a few more tickets, I guess. But even 20,000 is pretty decent bit of money. And yeah, I think hopefully if the teams are on a more solid footing moving forward and we're more contention than we are, then it'll increase the interest as well. But yeah, I think the start of the season would be a good switch to
Yeah,
reinvigorate.
I've never been a fan of it and as an event personally. It has been running for quite a long time in basically the same slot in the season, and you would think that because it's been running for so long in the same sort of place that by now it would be established as a must-go-to event, and I don't think it's really done that. So you sort of wonder whether that's a brand, the Judgment Day brand, is one worth continuing with. My own feeling has always been that if you're kind of losing a derby game from your home ground, then you're losing one of the games which really, as long as it's scheduled sensibly, will always get a good crowd anyway. So you're losing that. And I've always thought if you want to boost the crowd by using the stadium factor, why not use games that maybe wouldn't sell well anyway? So my thinking was always have two games against the Irish sides and call it Wales versus Ireland Part 2 or something like that, rather than, or, say Cardiff versus Edinburgh and Ospreys versus Glasgow and call it Wales versus Scotland Part 2, because that way you're using the stadium factor to get more people in for games which typically don't sell that well. It seems a little bit of a waste to me to use the stadium factor for games which really should sell well anyway. So I've always been dubious about it. Maybe changing in the calendar would work. I don't know. Yeah.
That's not something that I've really heard before. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, Steve, that's not something I've really heard before, that suggestion, but it's like sounds really good. That would invigorate me to go more if we weren't playing one of the Welsh teams, because I think part of the reason why ticket sales are so bad is I think this is the first year in a while that 3 out of the 4 teams have got something to play for. So it just you just drive interest out of it, and then at the end of the season we've got one home game left that we can sell, which is the week after. So maybe we get a bit of a boost, but having it earlier in the season or linking it with something else, then because invariably it's there to try and sell tickets, right? And it's not doing that job.
Yeah, absolutely. I think certainly if you put it earlier in the season, there's at least logic there in terms of if you put it, say, the 3rd week of October, you've got your Wales players who are back, who've played in the summer, they're back involved. It's a sort of a warm-up for them almost ahead of the autumn internationals, playing a big game at the stadium. You've got the WRU hoping for a boost then of more ticket sales for their autumn internationals, and there's plenty of games like festive derbies and European games coming up for the clubs to take advantage of. So if they're going to continue it, but I think there'll certainly be some fallout if and when the attendance is pretty poor this weekend, and possibly the attendance of this weekend is bettered by that of Bristol v Bath at the stadium in a couple of weeks. That'll be a particularly embarrassing moment for the Welsh Rugby Union and for Welsh Rugby generally, and will spark a debate on what the future of these sort of event days are. To the game itself then, Cardiff, the away team in Cardiff on Saturday against the Ospreys. It's 3 o'clock kickoff at the Millennium Stadium. If you can't make it to the ground, then it's on Scrum 5 Live. A bit of team news. Cardiff will be without still the likes of Ed Byrne, Will Davis-King as mentioned, Jacob Beetham, Theo Cabango, Ewan Stevens, Mason Grady, Rhys Barrett, and Stefan Manuel, of course, will be in the head injury assessment protocol. It seems possible that Ray Lilo will not be available this weekend either. He picked up a knock against Connacht and managed it for most of the game, but he hasn't been seen in any of the training footage they've put out from the last 2 weeks. So whether he's just being very carefully managed or whether he's actually injured remains to be seen. But Josh McNally is also almost certainly unavailable. He, as part of his release from the RAF, as part of their elite sportsperson program, still has to play twice for the RAF against the Army and the Navy during the season, and the game against the Navy is this Saturday at Kingsholm. The only player who is available, and a bit of good news, is that Callum Brayley's back from the dead. I thought he'd left. Like the man with the best try to minutes ratio in Cardiff Rugby history at the moment is still there in training, but I think it's probably unlikely to play again with Ellis Bevan, Johan Mulder, and Aled Davis still hanging around. The game itself, Cardiff obviously drew with 13-all with the Ospreys against New Year's Day earlier in the season. We lost 29-33 at the last Judgement Day at Cardiff City Stadium last year. Since the start of the 2016-17 season, there's been 17 games. Cardiff have won 4, lost 12, and drawn 1. But the only sort of good bit of stat in that is that of our 4 wins, 3 of them have come in this spring-summer slot where we tend to play the Ospreys once in the middle of winter and once later in the season. It seems to benefit us a bit more with the drier weather and harder pitches versus slogging it around the brewery field in a swamp. Ospreys lost to Lyon last week to get knocked out of the European Challenge Cup at the quarter-final phase. Shock to all involved that the Ospreys have lost another quarter-final. They paid the price for that a little bit. They'll be without Adam Beard, Rhys Davis, and Justin Tipuric, having been quite a physical few weeks playing the Scarlets twice in 2 weeks before that. In terms of the table, Cardiff are 9th with 36 points. Ospreys are 12th with 33. There's 12 points between 5th and 15th at the moment, making that race for the playoffs very exciting indeed. On the game itself, Fraser, coming to you, is it a game that sort of might define how successful this season is for Cardiff, when people have that sort of recency bias at the end of the season of looking at games that have just happened? If we beat the Ospreys and lift the Welsh hubcap on the back of it, will people sort of look at the season as a whole and go, yeah, that was actually pretty decent in the end, even if we don't make the playoffs?
I think it would make an impact if we did see off the Ospreys, because I think there's some doubts creeping in. Obviously, we lost Connacht, and just our second half of the season's not been as good, which we anticipated because the fixture list is, harder this in the second half of the season. And I think if realistically we go into South Africa, and I mean, Jockey was saying it, you're not going to get many points out there probably. So these last 2 games against Ospreys and Munster are the real. If we could come out of those with a victory, I mean, and Ospreys, I think we really should beat them based on prior form this season. I think I watched them playing or Lyon against Ospreys. They felt quite like us against the Lions. It was like the Lyon didn't really do a huge amount, or like we're kind of defending a lot of the game, and Ospreys were struggling to make an impact, and then Lyon just took their chances. And that's what we've been good at in games, is like getting the opportunity and then slicing through and scoring a nice try when we can. So I think we've definitely got the potential to win this game, and I think it would galvanize fans, especially after the difficult couple of weeks that we've been through. I think it would make a big impact. But I also think we're all reasonable. Well, I say that most fans are reasonable enough to understand circumstances and accept that we're still rebuilding as a team in general. But yeah, I think it would make a difference, and I'm fairly confident. Although I said last time we played Ospreys that our pack can match up to them, and it just isn't. So again, I'm talking out my ass with this.
Steve, the Ospreys are a little bit beaten up coming into this, but sort of opposite to that is that they've played quite a lot and got a bit of momentum behind them. Cardiff have rested and obviously been through quite a lot off the field. Then, which one is sort of the more preferable to your mind? Would you rather be coming into this game?
I mean, the impact of the off-field stuff is difficult to measure, isn't it? I mean, it could mean that the players, have a lot on their minds, even though their employment is secure, but it's a lot of stress. But it may also create a bunker mentality, and not going to know which until we see it really. Ospreys having injured players is obviously welcome, but I mean, if we don't have Ray Lilo, I mean, you can't underestimate what a blow that is. We don't. I mean, it would be. I guess it would be likely to be Harry Millard playing centre. Ray Lilo's impact on this team is you can't exaggerate how big it is. I mean, thinking back to the Connacht game, and I think you were watching the game through the medium of the pod WhatsApp, and I think Tony said, "Oh, Ray's done, Ray's off." And shortly after that, Ray scored a try, laid out Bundyaki with the tackle, and was outstanding. I mean, we'd all like to be Ray Lilo when we grow up. Very, very difficult player to replace. And Harry Miller played reasonably well at centre against Benetton. How will he be able to repeat that? Yeah, I'm really not sure what to make of this game, partially because I didn't see the Ospreys game, so I was a bit surprised they lost to Leon. They have been playing well. As to your question, which is preferable? Oh, go ask me on Monday. There's so many kind of imponderables with this game, particularly due to what happened last week, that it's very difficult to call, isn't it? Certainly a game that would be great to win.
Harley made a good point on the main wrap this week that Cardiff have got a pretty good record of sort of playing quite well on the back of off-field drama. I think of this fixture 2 years ago when Dai Young was suspended sort of the day before the game, and then we won, and also obviously the sad death of Peter Thomas and the performance against Sale then the week following that as well. So maybe that'll be something to cling on to. Tony, Matt Sherratt said in an interview, I think it was actually last week, although it's only come out today, that realistically they're aiming, well, not realistically, but what they're aiming for is 2 bonus point wins from this game against the Ospreys and then against Munster to get themselves up towards the 50-point mark where they feel that is what will take to get into the playoffs. How confident are we that we could go and do that? Is that within this squad's ability to go and back-to-back bonus point win these 2 games?
I think so. It'll touching on the tumultuous time that the guys have had over the last week or so. If they can start the game quickly, then that might be the catalyst to keep going and not let everything else, all the other stuff, burden them down. But Ray's a massive miss, but I think we can get at him. Like we deserve something from this season. Like we've been better than what some of the results have reflected, and last year as well. Like it feels like playoffs would be a just reward for everything that all the close losses we went through last year and how they've changed that mentality this year, and how they've played rugby as well. Like it feels like playoffs would be a just reward. And when I think back to what I thought we'd be doing at the beginning of the year, I thought we'd be languishing near the bottom again. To be pushing for that playoff spot is massive for where we are. And we're wearing red like our new overlords, so surely that goes in our favour, right?
Well, I think Steve, you mentioned it that we start referring to the referee as our WRU colleague.
Yeah. He won't let his colleagues in red down on the weekend, will he?
I think fingers crossed we get a boost from that. Looking at the team then, there's quite a lot of gaps in my pre-selected team this week. Quite a lot of decisions for Jockey and co to make. Fraser, starting with the front row, I think the 2 props are sort of set in stone in terms of the loose head will be Domachowski and Danny Southworth, and tight head will be Azarati and Litterick. The question, I guess, is which way round would you put them? Are we sort of going heavy on the front row stuff from the start, or there's been a bit of chopping and change with them over the last few weeks, where, particularly at loosehead, where Southworth has mostly worn 1 and then Dom has come off the bench?
I think yeah, maybe have the Ron the boys come off the bench and hold firm, because I think Ospreys are going to be strong in the set piece throughout the game. They were against Leon, and they would look good in the scrum, and I think we're going to need a consistently competitive scrum throughout the match. So I'd maybe start Litterick and Southworth, and have Domachowski and Azarati to come on the 45-minute, 50-minute mark to push back if it's struggling, or maintain a competitive level against quite a strong pack. Although they are missing, yeah, as you mentioned, they're missing a few key players in that pack. So
Tony at hooker. I think Belcher probably didn't have his greatest game away at Connacht, which is unusual to sort of drop below his consistently high level. But as the club captain, is he somebody that we can drop, or do we have to keep him there?
He starts for me. One, because he's doing media this week, which is always my go-to decision on who's playing. But touching on what we've been talking about all the way through, right? He's a heartbeat of the club, same as Ben Thomas, and same as Teddy. I want those three on the pitch to drive us forward and to drag us through. So Belcher starts for me.
Steve at second row then, I've got Teddy in, but looks like McNally is not going to be there. So you've got Seb Davis, Rory Thornton, Ben Donnell, and I'll chuck Mackenzie Martin in there, although having watched him for the first time in the second row for the Rags on Saturday, he's playing as an 8 and just scrummaging in the second row. There's a very much a needs must element, I think, with Craig Howd being unavailable for the Rags. So of the sort of those 4, but mainly the first 3, I guess, who do we think would slot in there alongside Teddy in that starting second row?
Well, generally you'd say Seb Davis, wouldn't you? But I mean, he seems to have. I'm not sure whether it's because he's due to leave, but he seems to have slipped down the pecking order below Rory Thornton, which is a little bit of a surprise. I'm a big fan of Ben Donnell. I think he's quite an underrated player and more important than perhaps given credit for. I think he was missed earlier in the season when he was injured. I think I would possibly lean towards Ben Donnell and go in with kind of a lighter, quicker pack to at least start the game. And then, assuming Seb Davis still isn't higher up the pecking order than we'd usually assume, I guess Rory Thornton comes on later. But I'd lean towards a Teddy Donnell second row.
The second row that start against Benetton as well, so there's a little bit of cohesion there already. Yeah. Back row then, Fraser. Going straight back to number 8. I haven't sort of put Faletau straight in. That might be an error on my half. Is there sort of any like sort of qualms with chucking him straight in again? Obviously, he's been appeared in training in those videos. He's not taking full part, but I think Harley again on the wrap described it as a Nick Williams scenario where he just sort of turns up as and when he likes during the week. Is there any sort of debate about whether Alan Lawrence goes back in there, or do we just stick him with Faletau?
I mean, you could argue about it and say Alan Lawrence. I mean, he's had a great season, and Faletau. I mean, he played well against Connacht, and he's played well when he's come into the team. I mean, I actually realistically just play Faletau. He doesn't have. We don't know if he's going to be a next season necessarily. He's a brilliant player. This is meant to be a showcase event where you're showcasing, your best players, best against best in Wales. So I would play him for sure because he is just quality.
Tony, flanker duos.
Sorry, with Faletau, it might be his last game with the Principality, mightn't it?
Yes, that's true.
So
That's true. Yeah.
That's something worth marking, isn't it? Emotional game for him.
It's a bit of a shame that Tipurick's unavailable there as well. It'd be quite good to see the two of them play for the last time against each other at the stadium, certainly. Tony, flanker-wise then, particularly open side, I feel like if you polled Cardiff fans, the general feeling would be that Thomas Young is our best open side, but with him leaving at the end of the season, maybe similar to a Seb thing, or maybe there's something else. We just haven't seen much of him recently the last few weeks. Is this another game where Jockey maybe goes a bit more physical and puts a man or a Botham or a Dan Thomas there? Or is this, I'm thinking of particularly that game 2 years ago, is this sort of a Thomas Young fixture where he really likes playing against the Ospreys?
If Tips was fit, I would have picked both of them. With him not being fit, I think I'd pick Young. Just because they might be I don't know why my brain thinks that. Because coming into this, when I was looking at it, I'm thinking the Ospreys make a lot of offloads compared to us. So I want more back row players who can get round and make more tackles. But Tom Young does that. Maybe we don't attack the breakdown as much, which is the opposite of what Tom Young does. But I've somehow talked myself into I want Tom Young on the pitch.
He was
with
interviewed by the
maybe
UFC, by the way, so maybe it's that media. In the back of his mind, he's been chatting to the media, so maybe that's it.
totally swung me. And going back to the Hart thing, like I maybe want Alan Lawrence on the other flank like we did out in Connacht. I'm fine with a Lawrence, Young, and Faletau back row. Not to steal Coleman Nation's thunder from the Reddit, so who predicted that well before the Connacht game.
Any thoughts, Steve Fraser, on that back row? I mean, there's so many good players again, but man, both them. Like we've got Donald in the second row, but you could equally see him in the back row potentially. Any sort of strong feelings either way there?
I mean, I think part of the equation is perhaps judging who you want coming off the bench, because I mean, certainly at the moment with 6-2 split, which we seem to go for most of the time, picking players on there that can bring impact is quite important. We've benefited from that in the past and also been hit by it in the past. I think perhaps part of the reason Thomas Young has been starting on the bench is, as a guy coming on for the last 20-30 minutes, he brings a hell of a lot and can change games in that time. So I don't know if that would be part of the thinking, and you'd sort of then start with a bigger back row. I felt Alex Mann played very well has played very well over the past few games, so I wouldn't be averse to him getting another start either at 6 or 7.
Fraser, any strong thoughts there?
I mean, I do, yeah. I like the idea that what Tony said about Big Al getting a game at 6. Like, I don't know, it's about how Young it sounds nice to me. I like the idea of that, so that's what I'm going to pump for.
That's good. We'll stick with that. Into the backs then. I've penciled in Mulder, Sheedy, and Ben Thomas, 9, 10, 12. Don't know if there'll be any sort of changes in that regard. 13 then, we've mentioned it a bit earlier, that Harry Millard is likely to be there. The only sort of other option I can pitch to you is Elijah Evans potentially, but that feels very tough to chuck a lad on debut in against the Ospreys at Judgement Day. Has anyone got any other solutions?
I mean, Adams might be a punt.
That's what I was about to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Defensively, I would be more confident with Adams at 13 than I am with Millard there.
Yeah, I kind of like to see it tried. I mean, I would guess they'd go with an element of continuity and keep Harry Millard there just because he played there against Benetton, and I can't remember the last time Adams played 13 for anyone. It might be a little bit of a while. But I'm confident he can play there, and I mean, as he goes into the latter stage of his career, maybe that ends up becoming his position. I'm not sure. I would guess that it is going to be Millard.
I think it's a Millard on a prediction and an Adams on a if we were picking the team, maybe it might be one of those. If we put Millard in there for now, and then I'll leave Adams penciled onto one wing on a prediction basis. The other wing's a bit of an interesting one potentially. Then you've got Gabe Hamer-Webb. There with potentially Adams on the left then, and Webb doing the more physical stuff on the right, or you've got Adams on the right and one of Regan Grace or Tom Bowen, who I mentioned had his ankle heavily strapped, but was in the training footage with the first team from Monday, so seems to have bounced back from that quick enough. Tony, I'll come to you. Any strong winger preferences there?
Tom Bowen looked electric again on Saturday. Like, didn't look like he'd missed any time. I think with how he's played so far this year, he probably deserves to effectively keep his place. I really like Gabe, but Bowen is whenever, if you're sat down and he gets the ball, you get on your feet. He's the sort he's the sort of player that drags people away from a bar. He's that sort of player. And you want to talking about Judgement Day as a showcase, you want those players on the pitch.
Any concerns from anyone that it's too big an occasion for him, or maybe the lack of ticket sales plays into allowing Tom Bowen to play because it's not such a 75,000 seater scenario?
Well, I think
Yeah.
thus far with Tom Bowen, everything he's been asked to do, which we may have thought might be a little bit beyond him, he's done it, and like. I'm not sure if he would have played at the stadium before, and it might be a massive motivating factor for him to, you know, as a I think is he 19 now, as a teenager getting his first run out there. You said he was injured on the weekend. I wasn't at that game, but I think for those guys in the under-20s, it's probably best to keep an eye on the Junior World Cup. So anything that might aggravate an injury might be a reason to rest them. I'm thinking possibly Regan Grace, because I don't know if we can quite invoke the John Mulvihill rule here, because he never actually played for the Ospreys, but he is from that part of the world, and perhaps similar to Bowen, he might respond really well to getting a chance at the Principality, because you get the feeling with Regan Grace that he's running out of opportunities in rugby union, and maybe, I don't know, if you say to him, you know, going to put some faith in you. You get to run out at the stadium, which is presumably where you want to be, why you came from league in the first place. Just, you know, take this chance to show people what you can do on those big open spaces. So I think I'd actually lean towards Regan Grace for this.
Fraser, do you want a deciding vote?
It's a tricky one. I mean, Regan Grace is someone I think everyone wants to do well and want to see what he can. He has been capable of doing. So, but I think I'm going to go for Tom Bowen just because his showcase of Welsh. I mean, obviously Regan Grace is Welsh. But it's a good opportunity for a young Welshman. He draws the attention of the crowd. It's a showcase for him. He is young, and it might be a bit much too soon, but what he can do is crazy. And he is exciting, and it's just fun to watch Tom Bowen do whatever. Even when he was at number 9, it's still exciting to watch him, fuck that up. But it was, he's just anything he does is entertaining. So yeah, let's go for Tom Bowen. Why not?
I'm glad you didn't say Gabe Himmelweb and leave it to me then. That's what was the nightmare scenario there. And then
You would have sided with Gabe, we know that.
Try and get another clip on his Instagram. I've got Cam Winnett at 15 then, just because I think he's probably already got the jersey on, to be honest.
Yeah.
Bench then, Steve mentioned earlier, 6'2". I'm imagining we 6'2" again. It seems to be sort of a standard now. It's more of a debate about whether we go 5'3" or not at this point. The 6'2" is more standard to us. It leaves Domachowski and Azarati as the replacement props. Evan Lloyd probably is the reserve hookers, carrying on that, unless anyone's got any real strong Evan Daniel vibes. Thornton then in the 19 jersey. I've got Mann and Botham as your replacement back rowers, with Lawrence Young and Falatau starting. Replacement scrum half, Steve? Davis versus Bevan. Any sort of strong feelings there?
I feel like when Bevan played against Benetton, he played like a guy who's been really desperate to get out on the field and prove a point. And I imagine he'd give us the same again on Saturday. So yeah, I would expect him to be in the 23.
So that's Bevan in 22 jersey, and then there's a couple of options for the 23. Obviously, Grace, as we've mentioned, to be but I think if we're doing a prediction, it probably will just be Roy Jennings again, because that seems to be the way that that Jockey's going with it at the moment. That Jennings just is the outside back cover no matter what, essentially. So that's
it would be quite nice to see to get a final run out at the stadium, wouldn't it? Because he's been a great servant for us, and it'd be lovely to think that we could win a game with a Tinas to be a drop goal in the dying minute or something, and give
We
us
got
a
Munster next
legendary
week for that.
Oh yeah, I'll take that one too. Yeah,
Either that, or we can do it out in South Africa in the last minute of the South African game for us to get into the playoffs. But maybe that's the story.
I suspect he'll be hoping to go back and do it next year for the Dragons then as well. So That's our 23 then. So from 1 to 23, Danny Southworth, Liam Belcher, Rhys Litterick, Ben Donald, Teddy Williams, Alan Lawrence, Thomas Young, and Talupe Falatau. Excuse me, Johan Mulder, Callum Sheedy, Tom Bowen, Ben Thomas, Harry Millard, Josh Adams, Cam Winnett, Evan Lloyd, Corey Domachowski, Kieran Azarati, Rory Thornton, Alex Mann, Ellis Bevan, James Botham, Ellis Bevan, and then Rory Jennings. Pretty strong team there. Anyone think that can't get the job done, or are we all happy that that's a pretty strong team for the game that will be? Oh, I'm
Good
seeing
enough to
nods.
win, so we'll have to see.
Good stuff. Right. Thank you there, gents. We'll leave that there then for this week. Next week on the pod, pure rugby, hopefully. Hopefully less off-field news, the better. Looking back on Judgement Day, looking ahead to that game against Munster. We'll have the Rags and review their regular season in the SRC as well. Maybe some squad announcements with that Munster game being the last one of the season as well. They tend to get a few announcements out before saying goodbye to people at the Arms Park on that last one. But thank you, gents, for joining me. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll catch you next week.